Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Acid Reader's Briefing, the podcast that turns a full issue of a major magazine into a 20 minutes audio pack. Today we are bringing you a reader's guide to the July 27th, 2026 issue of The New Yorker. Our core themes today include the following. This week's cover is Spa Day by Marcellus Hall. Picture a crowded public spa. People wrapped in white towels stand on stairs, lean against railings, sit by the pool, check their phones, listen through headphones, or move quietly through the water. A horizontal waterline cuts across the scene, changing the colors and outlines of the bodies above and below it. The space is busy, but everyone still seems to keep a private rhythm. 5 large questions run through the issue. What responsibility does the United States carry when its weapons and diplomatic protection shape a war? Can Venezuela move from disaster and oil politics toward a genuine democratic transition? What happens to journalism when subpoenas, device seizures, lawsuits, and criminal procedure are used to pressure reporters and their sources? How can one grieving parent expose a nationwide engineering failure? And what do disappearing languages, high-stakes exams, radical performance, and photographic memory tell us about identity, survival, and the systems that define a life? Next, let's begin at the front of the magazine and move through the issue, one piece at a time. Section 1, War, Diplomacy, and Policy Accountability. 1.1. The Enabler, How the Biden Administration Fueled Israel's Wars. In her letter, Mirjana Spoljaric said that Israel's conduct of hostilities was incompatible with the law of armed conflict, particularly its duties to protect civilians, distinguish military targets from civilians and civilian infrastructure, treat detainees and the dead with dignity, protect medical facilities and personnel, and allow humanitarian aid. At the same time, the Biden administration's firm public support created a moral hazard and encouraged Benjamin Netanyahu to try to expand the fighting into a regional war. During the Gaza campaign, the administration approved more than $20 billion in weapons sales to Israel. The May 11th report said there were grounds to assess that American weapons had been used in ways inconsistent with the laws of war or established civilian harm practices, yet it also said specific incidents could not be verified. More than 70,000 Palestinians died, most survivors were displaced, and Jake Sullivan later acknowledged that the United States should have exerted greater pressure on Israel to take a different approach. Section 2, State Crisis, Opposition, and Resources. 2.1. Opposition in Exile. In June 2026, Venezuela was struck by a series of catastrophic earthquakes. Streets cracked, buildings became rubble, hospitals were overwhelmed, and the death toll was thought capable of exceeding 100,000. Machado had led her party to victory in the 2024 presidential election with 2/3 of the vote, but the United States left Maduro's vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, in power in the name of stability. The landing rights for Machado's return flight were revoked. Her team had registered nearly 70,000 local command groups and collected more than 80% of the printed vote records, enough to prove a landslide opposition victory. The government took roughly 72 hours to send rescuers to the worst-hit area. Initial damage exceeded $6 billion, and an estimated 50,000 Venezuelans were missing. Without a political transition, the article argued, genuine economic recovery or national reconstruction would not be possible.
Section 3, Media, Democracy, and Power. 3.1. Under threat. For years in office and out, Donald Trump openly said that reporters who refuse to surrender their sources should be sent to prison. 3 New York Times journalists received subpoenas to testify before a federal grand jury in Manhattan. Federal Bureau of Investigation agents also went to the home of Washington Post reporter Hannah Natanson and seized her computers and phones. Justice Department rules first adopted in 1970 cannot be enforced directly by courts, and only 3 comparable grand jury cases involving reporters had occurred since 2000. Large national newspapers may have legal teams, money, and public support, but local papers, nonprofit newsrooms, independent reporters, and small broadcasters may abandon a sensitive story before completing verification, causing unauthorized information to disappear. 3.3. Mark making. Julian Schnabel first went to Italy 50 years ago because he believed that art history books could not tell him much unless he stood in front of the works themselves. His new series, Italy Through Its Trees, drew on Rome, Sicily, Venice, Verona, Padua, and other places, while he continued to paint on broken plates and old maps. Netflix also released his film In the Hand of Dante. It runs for 2.5 hours and moves in and out of black and white. When investors asked him to cut it to 2 hours and make it entirely in color, he asked whether they thought he was making a Marvel movie. 3.2. The Arch Guy, Rodney Mims Cook, Jr., chair of the United States Commission of Fine Arts, gathered 50 guests inside a replica Roman triumphal arch in downtown Atlanta to hear the Russian violinist and Deputy Minister of Culture Mikhail Simonyan. Cook's commission had approved a 90,000-square-foot White House ballroom. He argued that, as long as the proportions were right, the building would leave a legacy of astonishing beauty. In June, he took photographs of his Russian-style house to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum and described his mission as soft diplomacy. The final piece was Yankee Doodle, and Cook became misty-eyed. His diplomacy had no formal authorization, no clear agenda, and no verifiable negotiating result. It ran instead on seating arrangements, photographs, a hockey puck, Coca-Cola, gilded buildings, and plans for concerts. 3.4. Vampire Moments. The 73-year-old actor and playwright Eric Bogosian played the interviewer in the television adaptation of Interview with the Vampire, and in the new season his character became a vampire, too. In 2022, he found himself thinking that becoming a vampire was one of the few ambitions he had not fulfilled. When he arrived in Chicago, an offer to join the series was waiting for him. He had played a police captain in 61 episodes of Criminal Intent and had written and starred in talk radio. He also spent 7 years researching a true story about assassins who hunted the principal organizers of the Armenian genocide. For Bogosian, acting meant pretending to be someone he could not be in real life, a place of make-believe that felt happier than ordinary existence. 3.5. Ba-Dum-Bum. At 92, David Rothenberg made his stand-up debut at 54 Below. He had spent decades in theatrical public relations, and in 1967, he founded the Fortune Society to restore dignity to life after prison. Fortune began as a single desk in a Times Square office and later developed employment, legal, housing, and daily life support. Rothenberg said that trust had to come first. A 17-year-old named Abe began to recover only after ping pong and one-liners finally made him laugh, allowing his truth and pain to emerge. On stage, Rothenberg called himself the oldest stand-up comedian in America, with the operative words being standing up. The most popular story was about Peggy Lee, who once telephoned at midnight and sang All of Spring will be a little late this year down the line.
Section 4. Public Safety and Infrastructure. 4.1. Driven, Deadly Guardrails and American Road Safety. In the early hours of November 1st, Hannah Eimers' Volvo drifted off Interstate 75 and struck a steel guardrail. The terminal end was supposed to absorb the collision, slow the car, and force the rail to curl in front of it. Instead, the steel entered the Volvo and cut Hannah's body in half. Months later, the Tennessee Department of Transportation sent her family a $3,000 bill for the damaged rail. Steve Eimers then drove about 40,000 miles through 25 states inspecting guardrails. He estimated that roughly 1,000 Americans died in guardrail-related crashes each year, and that almost all of the deaths were preventable. About 5% of the rails he inspected were assembled from mismatched parts in what the industry calls Frankensteining. More than 8 pages of an approximately 800-page surface transportation bill adopted language from his Transparency Act, and defective rails nearest the White House were finally scheduled for replacement. Section 6. Family, Education, and the Pressure of Identity. 6.1. Testing. Bo was born in New Jersey and had lived in Seoul and Sydney. He treated South Korea's college entrance examination as his road into Yonsei University. On his first attempt, he scored 153 out of 200, and for the next 3 years he did little except sleep, eat, and prepare. Before his third attempt, Exile, another resident of the examination hotel, was taken to hospital after swallowing too much cold medicine. Both slept only 2 hours and still sat the examination from 8:10 in the morning until 5:20 in the afternoon, but he failed to reach 300 points. He took a job in a convenience store and still wanted to sit the test again. Sonia argued that an examination designed to eliminate children was neither fair nor a stable predictor of a life. The family believed in Bo, but not in the test or the educational system, and he began to consider a community college in the United States rather than postponing real life for another year. Section 5. Language, Culture, and Collective Survival. 5.1. Mouth-to-mouth. Languages are dying. Is that necessarily a problem? How sad should people be when a language disappears? The article distinguished ordinary language shift from the deliberate destruction of a language that remained alive. The 2023 earthquakes in Turkey and Syria killed more than 50,000 people, yet translation services excluded Kurdish, spoken by roughly 15 million Turkish citizens. In occupied parts of Ukraine, road signs were replaced, schools were made to use Russian, and Ukrainian books were burned. Languages can carry traditional knowledge, but the association between linguistic vitality and mental health still requires careful testing. A Crook Master Apprentice program in the United States paid learners $15 an hour, while the federal government had spent about $180 million on language revitalization since 2005. The same money might also support schools, hospitals, or other genuine needs. More than 3,000 of the world's 7,000-plus languages may disappear, and admitting that not every language can be saved does not mean caring less. 6.2. I give my kid the talk. A father sat his child down in the grave tone of a sex education talk, only to announce that they had to discuss Stephen Sondheim. He began with Sweeney Todd, Hugh Wheeler, and Hal Prince, dismissed Cats, Les Miserables, and Rent as not being real life, and asked whether older children had invited his kid to a jukebox musical. The father said that such shows had entered Broadway like parasites and slowly killed the medium. The child took Sondheim's death literally as murder and began to fear that jukeboxes might kill the entire family. At the end, the child said that he had expected an explanation of sex. The father replied that, as a Sondheim fan, the child would never need to know about it.
Section 7. Performance, the Body, and Artistic Systems. 7.1. Renaissance Woman. Florentina Holzinger transformed the Austrian pavilion into SeaWorld Venice, a continuously operating system of portable toilets, a urine-filtering tank, flooded rooms, robot dogs, cleaners, a crane, and a giant bell. Performers sometimes remained in the tank for 4 or 8 hours, while bodies inside the bell, industrial diving, and real technical failures became part of the work. Her theater crossed opera, dance, body horror, and live video. Almost everyone appeared naked, and each production became research for the next. Trigger warnings did not stop audience members from fainting or leaving. At one performance of Sancta, the concertmaster fainted, broke his nose, and damaged his instrument. Holzinger herself had once fallen 16 feet. The company later enforced rigorous safety procedures, but continued to live with risk, accident, and failure. The work recorded how people lived through crisis and how a system could keep going while repeatedly breaking down. Section 8. Memory, Images, and Portraiture. 8.1. Memory Lane. Mrs. Mintz and the narrator's mother often sat in the kitchen talking about illness, surgery, and hospitals. The child listened from the bedroom and treated stray medical terms as mysterious stories. As an adult, the narrator came to understand that, by a certain age, people have witnessed an uncountable number of terrible events happening to an uncountable number of others. Mrs. Mintz also taught the narrator's mother to make veal parmesan. From then on, whenever the dish was served, The mother called it Mrs. Mintz's contribution to civilization. 8.2. What Peter Hujar's portraits reveal. Peter Hujar's exhibition covered 32 years, from 1954 to 1986, and the Morgan Library holds nearly 6,000 surviving contact sheets. He used a twin-lens reflex camera loaded with 120 film, allowing his subjects to see his face, and he described photography as a form of searching. Hujar asked people not to clown, pose, or perform, but to present a flat and burning honesty. The sequences preserve the way time accumulated in front of the camera. Jackie Curtis, Susan Sontag, Marsha P. Johnson, friends, animals, and people in the street left traces of temporary relationships in his gray-toned images. Photographs from a neurological institution in Italy led him toward the subject that mattered most to him, tenderness, and the ways people protect it or fail to protect it. The contact sheets preserved how a photographer built hope and pursued a dream before he fully knew that he was doing so. 8.3. Briefly noted. Talking Classics entered the ancient world through graffiti on Roman walls and a surviving loaf of bread. It asked readers to face the past's radical otherness and opposed turning professional training into a test of identity. The cruelty of nice folks returned to Minneapolis and showed how racial covenants, redlining, and over-policing allowed cruelty to operate steadily through planning, contracts, and administration. Glyph drew two estranged sisters back together through ghost stories from childhood, with language preserving trauma and also enabling reconnection. A real animal followed Lucy through 3 serious relationships over 10 years. Love did not automatically heal her, and she ultimately had to rebuild a relationship with herself. The 4 books offered no single conclusion, only 4 ways of refusing to escape complexity.
Section 9. Cinema, Poetry, and Reader Participation. 9.1. Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Christopher Nolan's adaptation removed the divine debate on Olympus and shifted destiny from the gods into family relationships and war trauma. His Odysseus became a rough, practical tactician. The Trojan horse was expanded into the hero's central wound, a gift turned into a lethal weapon that left him guilty for violating the laws of hospitality. The film interpreted his wandering through post-traumatic stress and an inability to re-enter post-war life, while reducing the cruelty, ritual, and mystery of Homer's world. The review argued that the scale of the production did not carry the audience into an ancient Greek mind. Contemporary dialogue and acting compressed the characters into hard shapes, and the film's plain realism ultimately turned an epic poem into prose. 9.2. Mice. The poem moved from an ultrasonic, mating note that human ears cannot hear to a car whose wiring has been gnawed bare. Zoology, classical myth, Latin roots, Scottish poetry, historical fiction, and detective stories kept entering the verse. Romans once roasted dormice with honey and poppy seeds, while Latin imagined a contracting muscle beneath the skin as a little mouse stretching. Modern mice built nests from foil, lint, fiberglass, and foam, and they moved through libraries, laundry rooms, and literary tradition. All the grand illusions finally returned to a Toyota Highlander whose soy-based wire insulation had been stripped away. The mice were tiny, but they revealed how culture and technology both depend on material details that can be destroyed bite by bite. 9.3. Cul-de-Sac. A 7-year-old treated his mother's ban on bringing frogs into the house as tyranny and set out like a real hobo. She did not stop him. She only tucked a foil-wrapped sandwich into the kerchief tied to a stick. He went no farther than the nearby cul-de-sac, where he sat and ate a sandwich that seemed filled with grief, salt, tomatoes, and cheese. When he returned home, the milk was still cold, showing how comically close his great escape had remained. 9.5. The Crossword. This issue's crossword was labeled medium difficulty and also printed the previous puzzle's solution. Across and down clues ranged through everyday language, film, art, sport, geography, and popular culture. Solvers could begin with certain answers and use the crossing letters to narrow the remaining possibilities. Any answer that looked right had to be reconsidered if it conflicted with the other direction. Meaning, spelling, cultural memory, and informed guessing all worked together to produce the final grid. 9.4. The Cartoon Caption Contest. Each week, the magazine printed a cartoon without words and invited readers to supply a caption. Editors chose 3 finalists and readers voted. The image remained unchanged, but a single sentence could alter the relationship between the figures, the direction of time, and the location of the joke. This week's cartoon was by Tom Toro, and entrants had to be at least 13. The real blank was not an explanation, but a point of view. Every submitted line decided who knew more and who misunderstood the scene.
Section 10. Issue Navigation and Urban Culture. 10.1. Tables for 2, Zoli and Pick 3. Zoli stood inside the Amont Contemporary Art Campus in Brooklyn. Its interior balanced industrial brutalism with mid-century sleekness, while an aquarium installation gave the bright room a hint of approaching apocalypse. The kitchen's ever-changing olney salad, seafood in tamarind dressing, black garlic chocolate cake, and taleggio-topped cheesecake created a playful form of exploration. The combination sounded strange but worked on the plate. On the same page, Pick 3 turned to the Grateful Dead, moving from the May 8, 1977 performance of Morning Dew at Cornell University to the Deadhead sticker in Don Henley's The Boys of Summer, and finally to the Double Wonderful t-shirt label. Together, the selections preserved live performance, nostalgia, and the private signals by which fans recognize one another. 10.2. Goings On. The week's cultural guide began with Lost Chapters. Venezuelan director Lorena Alvarado cast her real relatives as a fictional family, and a father and daughter drew closer while searching for an unusual novel from 1912 and traveling for research. Off-Broadway, Are You Now, or Have You Ever Been wove testimony from the anti-communist purge into drama, with Paul Robeson's refusal to name others becoming the clearest moral voice. The music listings included Kurt Weill's tribute to Philadelphia, Philadelphia's Been Good to Me, and Tori Amos's In Times of Dragons, which confronted threats to American democracy. Hugo Marchand performed Bolero and other works and artists at the center. 2 Paul Thek exhibitions presented work across painting, sculpture, and the Red Shrine. The Lebanese film A Sad and Beautiful World made war, civic strife, and economic disaster directly determine a couple's separations, reunions, and attempts to form a family. All right, we are now ready to enter today's main program. Before we do, please like, save, and share this episode so that other people who need it can also see today's content and become better versions of themselves. Thank you. You can now use the timeline in the video description or the pinned comment to find the articles that interest you and listen to them in depth.
All right then, it's a good time to call it a day here. So, this is the end of our program today. Thank you for listening to this episode of the ACID Readers Briefing. This program is produced under the supervision of the Pinecone Reading Club, a part of the Coffee ACID, who reserves the right of the program's interpretation. Coffee ACID is founded in 2020. Its founder's original aim was to use concise text, images, and audio to assist those working in scientific and investment fields to gain fast access to the latest magazines and books from worldwide, grasping their spirit and key takeaway messages within a short span of time. The purpose of this reading club is not just about helping people save time. Our pursuit is to preserve as much as possible of the thought and pure reality that belonged to humankind prior to the dawn of the age of AGI, the artificial general intelligence. The Pinecone Reading Club is part of Coffee ACID, and our online library mainly covers today's leading journals and magazines in scientific research, politics, and economics. Our science programs include major weekly SCI journals such as Science, Nature, Cell, and The Lancet, as well as many other subsidiary journals across a wide range of disciplines. Our political and economic programs include the weekly journals like The Economist and Barron's, as well as the monthly magazines such as Capital and Bloomberg Businessweek. Among all these publications, the text, image, and video content from Science, Nature, Cell, The Economist, and The New Yorker is freely available to the public and may be viewed, downloaded, and saved without charge. By comparison, within our subscriber-exclusive journal review series, Science videos may be watched free of charge during the first 3 days after release. Our financial and business content gives priority to paying subscribers. It is made available to them first after publication, and the restrictions are lifted 1 to 3 weeks later, when the material becomes available to all viewers for reading, viewing, and download. In addition, because some magazine content is subject to regional restrictions, should you require an original edition or a complete video, you may contact us directly by email to request the latest magazines and their text, image, and video content. Our email address is foris13107@gmail.com, which is FORIS13107@gmail.com. You may also search YouTube for MAKINOS_A10. On the YouTube channel Makinos A10, you'll find the complete open source content of our program. Finally, should there be a book or a journal you would like to learn about, but for which you do not presently have the time or opportunity to read, please let us know. We will work together with everyone to produce a guide program for the books you would like us to cover. Please also like, save, and share our program and offer us your constructive suggestions so that more people who need it may discover better program content, continue to improve themselves, and become better versions of themselves. Thank you, everyone. In this new age, we wish you all the best with good health, safety, and luck. Let's keep calm and carry on with the flow of our time.